Hello, and welcome to this short video introducing the writing a review assignment for Composition 1013. I'm just going to quickly walk you through what's required of you for the assignment, and then maybe talk a little bit about some of the features of effective reviews, and talk as well about what kind of exercises you're going to be doing on the way towards completing this. So just real quick, the essay is going to be 700 to 1000 words long, so a little bit shorter than the writing analytically assignment. I've simplified the deadlines a little bit, so there will be fewer drafts than you had in previous assignments. So your first deadline is going to be this Sunday, the 12th of April, where you have to have an introduction and an outline plan completed. So that's the 12th of April. I would say, though, that if you're a little bit late with that, it's not a big problem. It's okay to submit that Monday, Tuesday, whenever. But the sooner you can get it to me, the sooner I can give you feedback. So that you can be working on that. The next deadline will be the 19th of April, where I want you to have a completed draft of the essay. Doesn't have to be good, it just has to be done. And the reason for that is so that you can participate in workshops with some group partners and maybe help one another to revise and complete those. And the final deadline for the review will be the 26th of April. So we have a couple of weeks now to complete this. The writing counts final deadline is also that week. It's on the 22nd of April. However, if you submit an introduction draft on or after the 12th of April for feedback from me, that will count for your writing counts element of this as well. So, writing a review. So you could write a review either about a movie or about a TV show or a book that you like or an album or anything that interests you, any kind of art or any kind of creative work. You're going to evaluate it. You're going to tell your audience why they should go and see this movie or read this book or listen to this album, or why they shouldn't read this book or go and see this movie because you think it sucks. Okay, so you can go one way or the other, but you need to take a stance. You need to be trying to persuade your audience that to agree with you that this is a good thing or it's a not so good thing, right? So to do that, there are three really fundamental parts of any review, right? One is background. This is where you sort of explain what the work of art is, who made it, who's in it. So like if you were reviewing a movie, you might talk about who the director is and what they've directed before, what kind of movie this is, so that your reader gets a sense of, okay, what kind of expectations should I have when I go and see this movie? The second thing after background is criteria. Criteria refers to all of the ways that you're judging this piece of work. So if you're reviewing a movie, you might want to evaluate it based on its the quality of the acting, or you might talk about the quality of the dialogue, how well written it is, or you might talk about the lighting or the way that the scenes are shot. You might talk about the soundtrack and the music and how those things help to create a mood or an atmosphere. All of those things are criteria. They're reasons that you have for the success or the failure of the thing you're writing about. Okay, so those three things are really crucial to a successful review. You need to have background, criteria, and the third one is evaluation, which is where you ultimately decide whether this thing is worth seeing or listening to or reading, right? So background, criteria, and evaluation, okay? And during the next couple of weeks, we're going to be focusing a lot on developing criteria and deciding what the effective criteria are for judging a piece of work, right? So I've given you a few examples of what criteria might be, but it also depends on what you're reviewing, right? So to take movies as an example again, say you're reviewing a horror movie. Now, you have to ask yourself, well, what's appropriate for reviewing a horror movie? You're not going to ask yourself, well, it wasn't funny. You're not going to judge a horror movie because it didn't make you laugh, right? Because that's not its purpose. The ultimate question with a horror is, was it scary? Did it put the fear of God into me? And if it did, then you think, well, maybe it's a success as a horror movie. But you can go deeper than that because horror movies are filmed in a certain way, right? They tend to have darker lighting, they tend to have a very different kind of music than, say, a romantic comedy will have one kind of music, whereas a horror movie will have very different, maybe more harsh atmospherics and more harsh kind of music, right? So when you're determining whether a horror movie is good or not, you have very different criteria than you would if you're judging, say, a romantic comedy or like a sitcom, say you're reviewing Friends or something. That review and the criteria you use for reviewing Friends would be very different to the criteria you would use to review The Shining or something like that, right? So you need to be able to pick appropriate criteria. Um, and one of the things that we're going to be doing is thinking about, well, how do we decide? What kind of criteria do I want to focus on? And ultimately, there isn't a right answer here. It's like, well, what criteria do you think are the most important for understanding this movie and persuading people to watch or not watch this movie, right? Now, I want to just talk briefly about the introduction, right? So you're going to, this week, you're going to try and draft an introduction to your review. First thing you need to do, obviously, is decide, well, what is it that I want to review, right? What movie, what book, what TV show, what am I actually writing about? Once you've done that, you'll need to do a little bit of research into it to figure out some background. You might want to think about, well, who's the director of this movie, or who are the stars in it? What's it about? You don't want to give away the whole plot. You don't want to tell somebody, oh, this is all of the stuff that happened, and don't feel that you need to do that. But you do want to tell somebody that, something like what kind of movie it is and what sort of genre it's a part of. If it's a horror movie, for example, if it, and you can also maybe mention what kind of movies is it similar to? What would you maybe compare this to? Um, so after you've done that little bit of research to establish that background, you'll then need to establish, well, what kind of criteria am I going to use to review this? What am I going to evaluate it based on? And finally, you're going to offer your overall evaluation. You're going to say, well, this is how I feel about this movie or this album or this book. That it's ultimately a good movie or an effective movie or a scary movie or a funny movie or whatever. In fact, avoid just saying it's good or it's bad. Try to be more detailed or more specific about what you think. So when you're doing the introduction, like all of the assignments we've done so far, there's a certain amount of mapping going on in your introduction. So like when we did the report, I asked you to talk a little bit about the background of the issue that you're going to write about. What's the wider debate? And then I asked you also to sort of say, well, what specific issue are you focusing on here? And then I asked you to do what I called a structuring sentence, where you sort of map out what the body paragraphs of your essay are going to do. And this works the exact same way. You're going to begin with some background, maybe explain what the movie is or the book is, who's in it, what's it about, that sort of stuff, briefly, like a sentence or two. And then you're going to talk about, well, what is your overall stance? Is it something that you're positive about or negative about? And then you're going to have a structuring sentence that sort of signposts for your reader where the body paragraphs are going. And what that sentence is going to include is kind of giving an overview of what criteria you're going to focus on. Okay, so those are the elements that your introduction needs to cover: is the background, the your own evaluation of it, and what are the criteria that you're using to arrive at that evaluation. Okay, so there are some samples of reviews available. On Canvas, you'll find one sample that is written by a former student from last semester who wrote, I think, an excellent review of the British Bake Off, the British reality TV show. And I think it's a great model of how to structure one of these reviews, and to do it in a very sort of engaging style. So if you're wondering about, like, okay, I don't know how to approach this, the first thing I would tell you to do is have a read of that sample and think about, okay, how did this person present that show? What criteria did they use, right? Those criteria might not be appropriate to what you're doing, but it'll give you an idea of how to structure it. Okay. Okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Um, Try and pick something that you know a little bit about, right? If you're somebody who doesn't know much about music, for example, maybe avoid writing about an album or about music, because I sometimes find that even if you're a big fan of whatever the album is, you might not be all that good at explaining why you're why you like it or why you don't like it. Whereas people tend to find it a little easier to explain what works and doesn't work about, say, a movie. But one way or the other, try and pick something that you're enthusiastic about. You could write about a movie that you really hate, but it should be in an area that you tend to like, those sorts of things, right? Because ultimately you have to come across as credible here and as passionate, right? So you want to make sure that you're writing about something that you do care about, and that does interest you. The other thing is that you are trying to persuade people, right? Your objective here is to try and convince people to agree with you. So it's not enough to just say, well, I just think it's really great because, in my opinion, it's really good. That's fine if you're just talking to your friends, but you're trying to show people why it's worth their time, right? So just saying that it's your opinion isn't going to do it. You really need to think about, okay, what are the criteria here? What are the things that jump out at me when I'm watching this movie or reading this book or whatever, that I say, like, these are the things that make this really good, or these are the things that make this really bad, right? Okay, so the last thing I wanted to mention is that this week I'm going to ask you to do a short daily grade, as well as doing the draft introduction. The daily grade, I'm just going to ask you to read a review of Frozen 2, the sequel to the wildly popular first Disney movie. So recently, Frozen 2 came out, and I've posted a review of it on Canvas. I'm going to ask you to read through that, and when you're reading through it, try and identify what are the criteria this reviewer used. In other words, what are the things that they draw attention to that make this either a good movie or a not so good movie? Okay, so because once you start to recognize how reviewers identify criteria and use them to judge things, it'll become a lot easier for you to do it as well. So I'll put that up in an announcement for the daily grade, but it's not something that should take you too long. Read through the review, write down your thoughts. Okay, here are the criteria. I think it's an exercise that shouldn't take more than 10-15 minutes. Okay. The main emphasis this week is going to be on thinking about what you want to write about and what kind of criteria you think are appropriate for doing that. As always with these things, if you're not sure how to do any of that or you're worried about it, get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to help you out or give you some advice or help you to think through anything. So just feel free to be in touch. The other thing is that deadline is this Sunday for the intro and outline draft. But as I say, if you're a little bit late with it, it's no big deal. The deadline is there to help you so that you can get that feedback a little bit quicker. But the main thing, and this goes for everything at the moment with the coronavirus and all of that, I get it. People are anxious and they're worried, and we have less time to get everything done, and it can be sort of worrying. I get that people are anxious. My job is not to make you anxious or find ways of piling work on you. My objective is to help you succeed at this thing. So if you're worried or you're anxious or you feel that the work is piling up, get in touch because I'm happy to help out. All right, we will be talking real soon. Bye now.